This video is brought to you by Surfshark. Stick around to hear more about the discount they're providing to the entire upper echelon community. Alright, here we go. The Twitter files. This video has been, by far, I'm pretty sure, the most requested topic in the channel's history. I don't get all that many requests, honestly, most of the time, but for this, Patreon messages, comments, locals DMs, DMs on my research Twitter account that basically nobody even knows about, Discord requests, you name it, it happened. My response? Okay, I'll talk about the Twitter files. For anyone who doesn't know, the Twitter files are a collection of documents that Elon Musk has chosen to start releasing about a situation in the 2020 election cycle with regards to Hunter Biden, a laptop, and possible governmental corruption. To be clear, I'm not weighing in on politics here, at least not intentionally, to the best of my ability. I'm simply trying to explore the current situation thoroughly based on what has been established as fact. To some, Hunter Biden is a polarizing figure deserving of extreme scrutiny. There is a hefty chunk of the population who believe that he and his father, current President Joe Biden, are career criminals that need to be prosecuted, but to others, these accusations are nothing short of irresponsible conspiracy. It's really not my job to tell people you should or should not care about the Hunter Biden laptop story. However, as a result of the now public Twitter files, Hunter Biden and his laptop are coming back on stage for another incendiary performance. The gist of it, for context purposes, is this. During 2020, a laptop was found and revealed that allegedly contained files from the personal life of Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son. Contained within those files were documents that some believe indicated political corruption. During a heated presidential race, that kind of information was obviously going to be weaponized, and the battle lines that were drawn over this particular issue ran extremely deep. On one side, conservative media amplified the story to as many viewers as humanly possible, but on the other side, left-leaning media largely ignored the story or referred to it as a conspiracy theory. More specifically, the idea that this laptop was Russian disinformation became a widely used counter-narrative, leaving many in the public wondering, what can I really believe? Obviously, a lot of people don't wonder, they just entrench themselves deeper into whatever existing thought pattern they had before the event took place, but for some of us, these dueling narratives were rather interesting to observe. Now, for the most part, that kind of political rivalry and contradicting narrative structure is normal, at least for America. I know other people in the world will say, wow, that's a really broken system, and it is, but it's normal for us. Except this time something was a little bit different. The formula had changed. Rather than a straightforward battle of optical spin on the same story, where the two sides merely took separate positions on a central narrative, one side began to unilaterally remove the story from public discourse. Originally published and shared by an outlet called The New York Post, a conservative outlet with, shall we say, a less than stellar track record, the story was almost immediately blocked on social media. Facebook took a variety of steps to limit the spread, as did other major companies out there, but leading the charge, by far, was Twitter. Almost immediately, Twitter decided that the link would be totally restricted. If you tried to tweet the article out to your fans, deleted. If you tried to reply to a random other post with a link to the story, shut down immediately. And even private messages between users, again in their direct message log, containing this article, would be bounced or removed by Twitter's moderation programs, meaning that the platform was effectively trying to wipe the story from public consciousness. Now, once again, the response to this was effectively split down the middle, obviously, as everything is in America right now, which is just an unfortunate reality. Some people believe that this was a blatant violation of freedom of speech. Others supported the idea and wanted stricter regulation on what can and cannot be said or shared online, because misinformation can be dangerous for them. But regardless of what we all personally believe, okay, it happened. A laptop got found, a story got written about the laptop. One side called it Russian disinformation, the other side said it was proof of total corruption, while social media, Twitter in particular, sided with the narrative that this laptop was harmful and should be stricken from public dialogue completely. That's the context. Alright, recently I've been talking about a whole bunch of topics that have to do with cybersecurity. I've run into phishing campaigns, disguised malware, and while I don't actually know if it ever ended up happening, someone recently said they were going to DDoS me and knock me offline. Thankfully, I have Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN, virtual private network offering defense against certain types of phishing attacks, malware, DNS tunneling, DDoS attacks, like what may have happened to me. I wouldn't know, because if it did happen, I was completely unaffected thanks to Surfshark. And also shields you from the inevitable and constant data harvesting, as well as tracking from big tech companies. Even further, Surfshark unlocks additional content on streaming websites like Netflix, for example, because geographic location is tied directly to licensing agreements. Simply change your region and enjoy increased options in your video library. Surfshark can get you around regional censorship, such as government restrictions on particular websites, and also offers encryption, IP protection or modification, and so much more. Today, they're offering a holiday special 85% off and 3 full months free if you click the link down below in the description using promo code Echelon. Again, that's promo code Echelon and 3 full months free if you click the link down below in the description. Big thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring the channel. So what now? Now we need to discuss what has most recently happened, bringing the story back around for another performance, because the Twitter files are beginning to reveal information that we, the public, normally wouldn't get to see. Everyone watching this is likely already aware that Elon Musk is the private owner of Twitter. It's not a publicly traded company anymore. Purchased for $44 billion, despite the fact that Elon Musk passionately argued to get out of purchasing the platform, but still, purchased for $44 billion, Elon Musk cleaned house immediately. He is now, in no uncertain terms, the sole executive with real decision-making power at the company, and he has wasted no time whatsoever in acting like it. Something important to keep in mind, he's actually not alone in this. Prior CEO Jack Dorsey has now publicly stated that Musk should release everything without filtering it, which might be motivated by different outcomes, I'm not sure, but the same functional impact of exposing skeletons under the floorboards would be realized should he take that approach. Anyway, Elon Musk decided to release batches of information to a specified journalist named Matt Taibbi, and this is where things get really interesting. According to his thread, Matt Taibbi's thread, supported by alleged documentation directly from within Twitter itself, both the Biden and Trump campaigns, under the banner of the Democrat and Republican parties respectively, had access to a series of tools where they could request that content be removed or profiles be banned. One particular example appeared to show that a list of 5 accounts were being discussed via email between Twitter and the Biden administration so that they could be taken down and removed. On a surface level, this would appear to be a smoking gun, but digging slightly past that, even just a tiny little bit, it turns out that the links are referencing non-consensual naked pictures of Hunter Biden. I like to think that we can all agree here, regardless of our political affiliations, that kind of material is in direct violation of Twitter's terms, and whether or not it was the White House emailing or just a regular random person reporting them, those images should be taken down, and the accounts posting them should be banned. The thread itself is rather long. I'm not going to read everything, but I'll link directly to it down below, and most of it is honestly kind of boring. Both political parties had access to private channels. One party might have had more access by comparison, probably, almost undeniably, but even then, the material they requested be removed, at least in the thread, was largely deserving based on existing policy. However, everything changes when the decision was made, or changed rather when the decision was made, seemingly by head of Trust and Safety Vijaya Gadde, to suspend all mention of the laptop story as a result of Twitter's hacked materials policy. This is where things went off the rails because even Twitter's own internal executives at the time, and managers, didn't understand how that policy could realistically apply here. The laptop was not hacked, it was abandoned. The New York Post story was not showing explicit pictures, at least not in its own text, so that couldn't be it either. And yet major political and journalistic figures were being locked out of their accounts just for mentioning it. Furthermore, there was no law enforcement ruling typically required for a large-scale determination of hacked materials, and even if that verdict had existed, the New York Post is a media publication, making the situation an absolute rat's nest of policy confusion. Here's the thing though, as confusing as it might technically have been, Twitter moderation decisions made it exponentially worse. Apparently, Jack Dorsey, CEO at the time, didn't even know that these actions were being taken. Apparently, the Trust and Safety Department was forging ahead with aggressive strategies that Jack himself was largely uncertain of. He had no idea. And when made aware of all this, Jack Dorsey seemed to be rather appalled at what had been happening, voicing concerns that Twitter had overreached, taken inappropriate action, and violated the trust of users. But still, we need some entertainment, so are you ready for things to spin out of control? Yeah, good. Responding to this thread, establishment media basically lost their mind, their collective hive mind, I would say. Rather than some sort of legitimate counterpoint, which does exist, right? You can make a legitimate argument that this is kind of natural for large companies, and you're always going to have this kind of, I don't know, tit for tat in these private channels is going to exist. But rather than arguing that point, the narrative began to emerge from more figures than I can possibly even count, that Matt Taibbi was a hack, and that he was, quote, running PR for the world's richest man, end quote. That's important because the quote began to literally reverberate all over social media, especially Twitter, parroted relentlessly by legacy media journalists, editors, and anchors. How's this one for an example? Imagine throwing it all away to do PR work for the richest person in the world. Humiliating shit. That's number one. But, you know, one example is not a pattern. It's definitely not some kind of regurgitated thing. So how about another one? From calling Goldman Sachs a vampire squid to giving free PR to the world's richest billionaire. Man, what a career journey. Okay, 2 examples. How about a third? Editors are great, not just because they make your work sharper, but because you can ask them things like, hey, should I be doing PR work for the richest man on the planet? End quote. Like, it's all the same. There really are more of these than I can possibly count, so I'm just going to read a few of them off rapid fire. I know he's telling you what you want to hear, but that doesn't change the fact that he's working PR for one of the richest men in the world. He didn't get the story, it was handed to him so he could do PR for the world's richest man. The Taibbi thread is a great example of overwriting when you don't have the goods, but you don't want to admit you're just doing PR for the world's richest person. Want more? Okay. 1 minute you're scourging Goldman Sachs, the next you're doing PR for the richest man in the world. Funny old life. Matt Taibbi always was and still remains a fraud. Doing PR for the richest person in the world should come as no surprise. Watching Matt's unbelievable fall into lazy reactionary commentator and now PR hand for the world's richest man is depressing. And again, making a deal to do PR for the richest man in the world in exchange for exposure. Like, I could read the rest, but it's endless. It's constant. They all say the same exact thing. Every single one of these people is media. Hosts on MSNBC, tech journalists, Bloomberg reporters, deputy editors, senior writers, chief editors, and the list goes on and on. The counter-narrative to Twitter's file dump here is, that's embarrassing because Elon is the world's richest man and you don't want to run PR for him. That's it. That's their argument. Even worse, after the initial dump, there was a rumored second thread which would appear the next day, allegedly. This thread never happened, but the reason for that is because behind the scenes, according to Elon Musk and other associated figures, Jim Baker, former FBI lawyer, a prominent FBI lawyer, I might add, and now Deputy General Counsel at Twitter, I think is his technical job title, had taken it upon himself to secretly vet and possibly scrub the data that was being given out to journalists. That is kind of wild. An executive apparently, if statements from Elon Musk are to be believed, went rogue, kind of, and began scrubbing evidence from a data dump before the media could look at it. And after the story breaks through, right, because it does eventually get released, containing whatever he allowed to be said or seen for it, an enormous amount of legacy media personalities echo an identical point that the story is nothing and it's embarrassing to run PR for the world's richest man. Still further, Wikipedia decided to hold a vote on whether or not to even allow an entry for the Twitter files on their website, which is kind of wild, and Google plugged in a warning on their search page for results associated with Jim Baker. Effectively, the entire left-leaning media apparatus began to systematically suppress the story through all remaining means at their disposal. But remember, the original approach was to brand this story as Russian disinformation, which has now been, and again, I'm trying not to be political here, but for this particular issue, I just have to say it, it's been categorically proven as a false narrative. Bottom line, the Twitter files so far don't actually contain any bombshells, but they're very troubling. Both political parties had access to more direct lines of communication, which really shouldn't be surprising. There was no indication revealed so far that a governmental administration made explicit requests to censor political opponents while they were directly in office, but there are signs that the platform was extremely willing to bend their policies, depending on who said what, and who had access to the controls. With that in mind, there is likely a massive amount of damaging information that could still come out with regards to a whole lot of different issues. And if I'm being completely honest here, my own conclusion is that the left-leaning employees of Twitter likely made frequent decisions outside the scope of their traditional responsibilities in a concerted effort to affect political influence in the United States. Remember, according to Jack Dorsey in 2018, I believe, Twitter's tiny population of conservative employees, which is a really small number, were literally too afraid to speak out about their beliefs. In such an environment, when moderation access is supposedly being awarded to both sides of the political spectrum, what do we think will win in private channels more often, right? Like group dynamics and group decision making, what's going to happen more often? The political leanings of the few will win out and sway the majority, and those few are too afraid to even speak publicly or acknowledge their opinion, or the political leanings of the vast majority who dominate all aspects of company culture. To me, the answer is pretty obvious. One final thing here. Possibly the most interesting aspect of all this is the revelation that Elon Musk had at least partially known about Jim Baker beforehand. In response to Cernovich, who accused Jim Baker of facilitating fraud, Musk replied that things looked pretty bad in April of 2022. 8 months prior to the eventual publication, only to then continue allowing Baker access, ultimately now firing him in the wake of these newest accusations. To be honest, it's all extremely confusing right now. Allegedly, there will be another data dump, or several perhaps, that will be released by Barry Weiss, another independent journalist who has been chosen by Elon Musk, but so far there are no actual smoking guns. There are valuable bits of information and really troubling things that point to maybe a broader culture of corruption there. And as I would describe it, a cold bucket of water is being thrown over us that should serve as at least a bit of a wake-up call about government and big tech collusion. But I'm not blown away. Maybe the next reveal will contain more, relatively speaking. Maybe Elon Musk will do what Jack Dorsey has called for and release everything, which I hope he does. But right now, my honest-to-God interpretation is that nothing will happen here unless more data is discovered. And even then, nothing will happen without a particular set of irrefutable conditions being met, which are unlikely to be met in the current landscape of tech secrecy and political media power. The most likely outcome? Two sides of a divided country will use this like they do any other flavor of the month scandal, and sling mud at each other. The left will look bad, probably, for 3 to 5 months at most, and then everyone moves on, because that's what happens. Information leads to outrage, leads to stalling, leads to complacency, rinse, repeat, begin again. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a productive cycle. I'm just saying it seems to be the most probable outcome. And I apologize if this is kind of underwhelming. Like, I don't have any bombshells to drop on you or information that isn't out there floating around. I don't have access to the files. After the sheer amount of requests I got, though, I don't know. I just figured I'd cover it. I'm really just unimpressed with the entire thing right now, actually. And I hope that there is some sort of ace in the hole with better and more complete documentation that's, like, set to be revealed. So, yeah, we'll see. That's it. If you want support, please check out the links down below. I'm working on a pretty big partnership to announce soon, but for right now, locals and Patreon, YouTube alternatives, merchandise, social media, and the video sponsor, of course, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.